So Prince William has drawn a line in the sand that is absolutely breathtaking in its finality. And the person standing right beside him, matching that energy with what I'm told is a spine of absolute steel, is Catherine. This isn't just about slimming down the monarchy or cutting off free rent for cousins anymore. This is a complete and total rejection of any future that includes Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And the most fascinating part is that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, is reportedly even more resolute than William. If anyone was holding out hope that time would soften the brotherly bond, that a smiling photo op at a family wedding might signal a thaw, you can forget it. The message coming out of the Prince and Princess of Wales's camp is categorical, and it's being delivered with a ruthlessness that, frankly, this institution has needed for a very long time. Before I get into the absolute wreckage of this family dynamic, make sure you subscribe to Windsor Weekly. We are the only ones tracking these power shifts without the sugarcoating. The catalyst for this latest round of palace warfare actually started with a seemingly unrelated target: Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. A bombshell report from Richard Eden at the Daily Mail, who has historically defended the York sisters, absolutely excoriated them for living in central London apartments subsidized by King Charles through the Duchy of Lancaster. He pointed out their vast private incomes, their jet-set lifestyles, and the fact that Beatrice was spotted partying in Mayfair with Nicky Hilton, a Rothschild, and Lady Eliza Spencer just last night. Eden's column was a complete 180, and he made it clear that while Queen Elizabeth and King Charles were happy to use the privy purse to foot the bill for these homes, Prince William will not. He says it categorically. William's friends confirmed to Eden that the heir to the throne believes the current situation is unacceptable and that only working royals should receive the benefits of being members of the royal family. This is the future king laying down the law, and you can trace the logic directly back to the trauma of the Harry and Meghan situation. The thinking is simple. If you accept the privileges, you do the work. If you trash the institution for commercial gain, you are cut off. There is no middle ground. The timing of this leak was surgical. We saw William at Peter Phillips and Harriet Sperling's wedding, where he was pictured for the first time in ages giving Beatrice a peck on the cheek. Everyone gasped. The narrative was that William didn't want to be seen in public with the York sisters. So this image was meant to convey family unity. But what you taketh with one hand, you giveth away with the other, right? Because simultaneously, the Sunday Times was briefed that the subsidized accommodation arrangements would end under any reign led by William. It's a classic good cop, bad cop maneuver orchestrated entirely by the future king's team. He can hug you in public while his communication secretary guts your living situation in the press. Lady Colin Campbell hit the nail on the head when she said William is a little bit too concerned, as is his father, with being seen doing the popular thing. The late queen wasn't like that. If Elizabeth II thought something was right, she did it and weathered the storm. She didn't brief against her own flesh and blood to curry favor with the tabloids. She walked Andrew down the aisle at Westminster Abbey in front of the entire world because she decided that was the right thing to do as a mother, regardless of the optics. William and Charles are, in her words, very seasick sailors. They panic at the first sign of a wave and start tossing relatives overboard to lighten the load. But here's where the hypocrisy gets so thick, you can cut it with a knife. This entire argument about Beatrice and Eugenie not doing royal duties is factually incorrect. Lady C herself confirmed she has been at events where the sisters acted as royal guests of honor. When the queen was too ill to attend an engagement at Windsor during her Jubilee year, Beatrice stood in for her. That is a direct substitution for the sovereign. Eugenie was the patron of the Poppy Ball for years, a massive charitable commitment. They have been doing official duties unofficially for decades, filling gaps when the senior royals were overstretched. And the money for their apartments doesn't come from the taxpayer. It comes from the Duchy of Lancaster, the king's private income. So what damn business is it of Richard Eden, or anyone else, what the monarch wants to do with his money to ensure his family is situated decently in life? If a millionaire doesn't subsidize his children, people call him a cheapskate, but the royal family is expected to toss their own onto the street to appease the politics of envy. That's all this is. A ravenous, unsavory envy dressed up as concern for the public purse. And William is playing into it because he wants to look like a man of the people, even if it means throwing his cousins under the bus. This behavior sets the stage for how William and Catherine handle the much more serious threat, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. The The pressure on William to reconcile with Harry has been unrelenting. It's coming from the British establishment, from former prime ministers like Boris Johnson, from the mainstream media, and from the relentless PR machinery operating out of Montecito. The narrative being pushed is that it's inevitable, that William's reign will be fundamentally weakened unless he publicly forgives his brother and brings him back into some sort of fold. The establishment wants the circus to continue because the circus sells papers and drives clicks. A healed, boring monarchy doesn't make for good business. But William understands something that these political vultures don't. Treachery is not an accident. It is a failing of character. Harry has shown himself to be treacherous and untrustworthy. And it doesn't matter what Meghan was offering in return. If Harry had had any decency and gumption, he would not have done some of what he has done. Selling your family for a Netflix deal is not a mistake you make twice unless you are fundamentally broken. William is absolutely right and resolute, and I am told by impeccable sources that it is not only William, it is Catherine. In fact, the Princess of Wales is in many ways even steelier than her husband. She is made of very steely stuff. She has to be. This is a woman who was thrown under the bus by Meghan on global television before the Oprah interview even aired, accused of making a grown woman cry over a bridesmaid dress fitting, and she had to stand there smiling while undergoing cancer treatment. Catherine understands that her position is entirely due to his position, and she has played the long game with a discipline that Meghan has never possessed. Meghan thought marrying the prince made her the star. Catherine understood that marrying the prince made her the guardian of the future. That is the fundamental difference between these two women, and it's why the public relates to William and Catherine on a visceral level. People can sense the reality of things. They can sense that Harry and Meghan are empty vessels making a lot of noise, and that Meghan is, to put it bluntly, a self-promoting hustler, and Harry is a weakling who has worshipped at a cult that has cost him his birthright. Catherine's resolve on this is reportedly immovable. She has seen the damage that proximity to the Sussexes does. She knows that if you drop your guard and forget the lessons you learned from dealing with narcissistic personalities, it comes back to bite you tenfold. I speak from personal experience on this, and it's a truth universally acknowledged by anyone who has dealt with a family member with a pathological victim complex. Every time you extend an olive branch, they use it to whip you across the face. William and Catherine are not going to make that mistake. They are not going to allow a half-in, half-out arrangement that would see Harry lurking around the edges of the monarchy, monetizing access while demanding security. The door is not just closed, it is welded shut. And the idea that politicians are trying to mediate this is laughable. Boris Johnson should worry about his own legacy, not the succession planning of the House of Windsor. The Labour Party has no business telling the future king how to manage his bloodline. The ruthlessness that William is displaying is often framed as a character flaw. I would argue it is the only sensible position. You cannot run a modern monarchy with hangers-on who reserve the right to sell your private conversations to Spotify. You cannot have a slimmed-down institution that still pays for the lifestyles of non-working relatives who party in Mayfair while trashing the firm. The evidence of how William and Catherine want things done is already public. Look at their lease for Forest Lodge in Windsor. They pay £37,200 a year, starting July 2025, on a short-term 20-year lease, with a rent review every 5 years in line with the Consumer Price Index. They made a point of publicizing this. They are paying market rent for their own home on the Windsor estate to set the standard. If the future king and queen are paying their way, why on earth should a cousin get a free ride? This is the new reality, and it is a direct consequence of the trauma inflicted by the Sussexes. The old way of quiet, unaccountable privilege died the moment Harry started screaming about unconscious bias on Netflix. There's a historical irony here too. Richard Eden and others point to Queen Elizabeth's success being supported by loyal cousins like the Duke of Kent and Princess Alexandra. They argue that Beatrice and Eugenie should be given more prominent roles, but the Queen also understood that you protect the institution by absorbing criticism yourself. She didn't leak against the Kents to make herself look frugal. William's approach is more transactional, more modern, and yes, more ruthless. He wants the credit for being a man of the people without carrying the weight of the family's eccentricities. It's a dangerous game. Slimming down the monarchy sounds great in a focus group until you realize you've cut all the reserve players and you're left with a starting lineup that is aging, sick, or traumatized. What happens when there are no cousins left to stand in at the Jubilee events? What happens when the balcony looks sparse and sad because you've alienated everyone with a drop of royal blood? But William is not being swayed by these historical arguments, and neither is Catherine. Their focus is singular: protect the direct line of succession at all costs. And that line runs through George, Charlotte, and Louis. Every decision they make is filtered through the lens of what kind of monarchy those children will inherit. A monarchy cluttered with feuding cousins and unaccountable expenses is vulnerable to Republican sentiment. A monarchy that is lean, transparent, and hardworking is harder to criticize. This is the calculation. It's cold, but it's logical. And it's why the Harry situation is so terminal. Harry doesn't just represent a personal betrayal, he represents the ultimate liability. He is the cousin who would never do the work but would demand the palace. He is the uncle who would sell access to the children for a documentary. Letting him back in, even for a cup of tea, signals to the world that the door is ajar. And if the door is ajar, the cameras will follow. The book deals will continue. The narrative of victimhood will be refreshed with new material. William knows this. Catherine knows this. The dynamic between William and Catherine on this issue is fascinating because of how they manage the optics. He does the public-facing hard man routine, the briefings, the strategic leaks to friendly editors. She does the silent, steely support. She shows up looking impeccable, smiling warmly, never saying a word out of turn, but behind closed doors. She is the immovable object. The public falls for the soft-focus Catherine imagery, but that underestimates her completely. This is a woman who waited a decade for a proposal, who navigated the breakup, who endured the weighty Katie taunts, who stood silently while her husband's brother's wife accused her of emotional cruelty, and who is now fighting cancer with a grace that has silenced every critic. That is not a weak person. That is a woman forged in fire, and her forgiveness is not forthcoming. Not for the stress, not for the accusations, and certainly not for the timing of certain revelations that coincided with her health battles. Catherine's rejection of Meghan is absolute, and because Catherine is the emotional center of that family unit, her word is law. So where does this leave the Yorks and the Sussexes? Beatrice and Eugenie will likely lose their subsidized apartments when William becomes king, but as Lady C pointed out, the family will simply revert to the Victorian model. They'll live in private houses in Belgrave Square, funded by the family but out of sight. The monarchy won't save money, it will just look different. The real loss is the relationship. William is currying favor with a public that has been whipped into a frenzy of envy by colonists like Eden, and he's sacrificing the private loyalty of his cousins to do it. That's a trade-off he seems willing to make. For Harry and Meghan, there is no trade-off, there is no negotiation, there is no softening. The ruthless streak in Prince William that seems so harsh when applied to the Yorks is the very thing that makes him impervious to the Sussexes' emotional blackmail. You can't guilt-trip a man who has already made peace with being seen as the villain. The establishment can push and prod all they want, the politicians can bleat about reconciliation, the PR operatives can plant stories about a brotherly reunion at a future event. It doesn't matter. William will not be moved. The lady is not for turning, but in this case, the lady is Catherine, and she's holding the line right alongside him. The broader royal landscape is shifting into something unrecognizable from the warm, chaotic family business of the Elizabethan era. We are entering the age of the professional monarchy, where everyone is an employee and sentiment is a liability. The late Queen's brand of benevolent matriarchy, where she absorbed the storms and protected her own, is gone. In its place is a corporate entity run by a CEO who's a little too sensitive to the quarterly polls. It's a monarchy that will be safer from scandal but poorer in spirit. Whether that trade-off is worth it depends entirely on whether you believe the institution's survival hinges on its moral purity or its human relatability. William and Catherine are betting the house on purity. They are purging the dead weight, starting with the cousins who party too much and culminating in the brother who betrayed them. The tragedy is that some of the people being purged actually did the work and some of the loyalty being discarded was genuine. But in the calculus of survival, collateral damage is acceptable. The message from Windsor is clear. There is no way back, not for the half-in cousins, not for the treacherous brother, and certainly not for the Hollywood hustler who thought she could burn the place down and still get invited to Christmas. The drawbridge is up, and the gatekeepers are William and Catherine standing shoulder to shoulder, looking out at the siege with expressions of polite, unbreakable steel. And make no mistake, this is not a temporary posture or a negotiating tactic designed to extract concessions. This is the permanent architecture of the new reign, and it has been forged in the crucible of betrayal, illness, and a relentless public scrutiny that would have shattered lesser personalities long ago.